Right, there we go. So it is now being recorded. I'm about to hand over to Andy Ezeilo. Andy is Andy lives in East London. Been married to an amazing woman, Sandra, for 28 years now, and they share something incredibly unique. They got married, and Andy will correct me if I'm wrong, but they got married on the 18th of September, which also happens to be a joint birthday. So I think they were destined to be together. Is that
Yes,
right, Andy? Yeah, I
that is
got that right.
You got the dates right, but destiny, I'm not sure, but that's God.
Okay. And so very special relationship. They've got two grown-up children. Andy's got a background in science. He's also got a PhD in neutron scattering, which I have no clue what that means, other than it just means Andy's super intelligent and he knows his stuff. But he's not going to chat about neutron scattering today.
Nope.
Otherwise, that might blow our minds. But Andy runs two businesses. He runs a property business and a gas installation business, and has just a lot of experience of growing finances and using it in a healthy, wise way. And so he will be sharing that with us now. Other than that, I'll just say not only is Andy a great guy, I also consider him a great friend and a big brother. So really delighted to have Andy speak today. And over to you, Andy.
Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me very well, and welcome to the conference. Yes, thank you, Obi, for clarifying the session, Refresh Your Finances. Just to, I hope you can see my screen okay. I'm assuming you can. So as I plow through the presentation, I will just be using my screen on my PowerPoint as a reference. There is no doubt that personal finances and whether they're good or bad does affect many aspects of our lives and our marriages and relationships. So finances, although in some ways as Christians or as people who follow God, there's a temptation to maybe minimize interest and concern in personal finances, they do have an impact. And likewise, you know, the condition of our spiritual health influences how we manage our personal finances. So just your view and perspective of God and your understanding and faith and convictions will influence how you organize your personal finances. And as I stated at the bottom there, you know, poor financial health can result in poor spiritual health or general health, and vice versa. So there is, I think, as a Christian and as I think someone who is running my own business and doing things in a certain way, I personally have convictions that that is important to keep an eye on our finances and to have a good understanding. I will read a story. This is Luke chapter 16. And it's the parable of the shrewd or the dishonest manager. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to read through that story. One, we're very familiar with it, and draw out some principles that I think will be helpful to consider as we think about our finances. I don't have much of a picture of what the needs are in the group. In other words, I may be wrong. Maybe in this group, everyone is financially very sound and very wealthy and doesn't need any help. On the other hand, it may be a group that is struggling to make ends meet. Maybe it's a mixture, a combination. So it's probably going to be a scattergun approach, and if something resonates, then it resonates. But we'll use Luke 16 as a kind of sounding board. And I'll read that. I'm going to read from a different screen. It says, Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer. The manager said to himself, what shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do, so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, how much do you owe my master? 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. Then he asked the second, and how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, take your bill and make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. I tell you, use your worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? This is, I would say, a parable that's misunderstood. I mean, some people get a bit concerned that there's this kind of, Jesus is kind of commending some kind of dishonest manager. I mean, just to clarify some basics on parables, all right? So Jesus is addressing this parable to his disciples. The Pharisees are listening, so they're picking up on this, but primarily to his disciples. A parable is not a theological masterclass. It's not meant to be nitpicked and taken apart. I think largely the parables were used to a way of Jesus finding out if you really wanted to learn something. So if you listen to a parable and don't learn anything, that's a kind of an alarm bell. It says, what have I missed? Because usually the parable is meant to say something to you that can resonate. It's important to understand cultural context as well. Some of these things are not necessarily as we see them, just like the tax collectors in those days. These kind of guys, they didn't always match the, so they could have easily gone to the debtors and asked them for more than what they give the master. And there was that room in between, like the tax collector, where they probably keep some for themselves. The manager was told he was losing his job. He was being fired. He was concerned about his future. So he kind of sits down and thinks, wow, you know, I'm going to lose my job. How am I going to survive? Let me think about my future. So he's thinking about his future. That's what the guy is actually doing. God is not calling us to be dishonest. So be very clear, God is not saying it is good to be dishonest. No, it's not what he's saying. It was the shrewdness of the manager that he kind of picked out. And he addressed the mindset of scale as well, because he also said those who have little or those who are entrusted, there's just this sense of like some people think I can give more financially if I earned a lot of money. But the parable kind of hints or points to the fact that it doesn't matter how much you have or don't have. It's addressing just a mindset. The call for us is to be trustworthy, and God uses this financial situation as well. If you use that as a kind of benchmark for if you are trustworthy, because if you can be trustworthy with that, then you can be trustworthy with true riches. And of course, there's a call to for money not to be our master, but for God to be our master. So that's a rough kind of description of the parable itself. In terms of the, I've split it into three sections to talk about. The first one is honesty and ownership. And this just deals with this idea that this manager was caught out. He was the kind of the business owner said, I've heard there's some things going around that are just not right. Come and give an account. And I've called this honesty and ownership because, you know, just addressing the issue of accountability. I think for some of us, we kind of think that we can get through life without having to give an account on certain things. The truth is, we will always have to give an account in some way or another. In this particular case, the boss said, "Come and give an account." There's this sense of his deeds were exposed, his dealings were exposed. Everyone could see now what was going on. There's this whole idea of you reap what you sow as well. There's a sense that in terms of our finances, I think there's this sense that if you deal with things a certain way, good or bad, you're going to reap something from that. So if you deal with it in a bad way, you're going to reap something that will come from that. If you do it in a good way, then you will reap something good. But this already of reap what you sow also applies to our finances. I'd like to think that we wouldn't wait for irresponsibility to catch up with you. This guy was caught out. He didn't come up and offer his failings. They were caught out. And I'm sure that's worse than if you come up yourself and say, hey, listen, this is what I've done, or this is what I'm doing. There's also this idea of learning to seek help rather than be caught out. I would like to think that we would see it wiser to recognize that we need help and then go and look for it, rather than waiting for the big explosion that happens when everything goes wrong. Don't wait for the bang. There's also this idea of being comfortable talking about your finances. Sometimes I know as soon as the word finances are mentioned, many a grown man may break out in a cold sweat or hide behind the settee, not wanting to address the realities of their financial situation, because sometimes it can imply that you don't know what you're doing, or you failed, and there could be some embarrassment or some kind of fear of really talking about finances. And again, be open to help and learn to take ownership where necessary. I think it's important that we, as adults, learn to own or to recognize where we have either made mistakes or we have done things that haven't been particularly helpful. So the real call in this first part is for all of us to really learn how to be honest and own issues relating to our finances. I've written down in the next slide just some of the impacts of poor financial health that you may recognize. Things like stress, ill health. Certainly, many of us who maybe have had challenges with our finances will face a lot of stress, and this could lead even further to ill health. One thing that is quite challenging is, and I put the second here, unable to meet important needs within the family. I know that often in my family, my extended family, there's a call for help to support something financially. And if you have poor financial health, you won't be able to participate in that, and you won't be able to help meet those kind of needs. Poor financial health can lead to arguments within marriages, within all kinds of relationships. And the next one, there's damaged relationships. I know in cases where I've maybe lent money to someone, or someone's lent money to me and it hasn't been paid back, and then there's some kind of difficulty in relationship because you feel that things aren't resolved and money is at stake, and do you forget this, or do you try and work it out? So some of the financial issues can lead to damaged relationships. A breakdown in trust. Certainly if one person feels that money is being misused, or that some people are not being clear about how they're using funds or how they're getting funds, this sense of trust can, or a breakdown in trust can come in. Certainly one of the key impacts of poor financial health is a lack of joy. I don't know how you can be joyful if you are struggling financially. A sense of discouragement, overcome with fear and worry, uncertainty for the future. These things can have an impact on our lives. Overworking. Some people think, well, I'll work more, I'll work longer hours, and that will help me to come out of a poor financial situation. And then that kind of overworking perpetuates, and then it becomes an issue. Deceit, that's a huge one, trying to cover your tracks if the finances are poor. You can avoid certain people, maybe you owe them the money or they owe you money. But certainly, again, that's linked to damaged relationships. And other things like put down missing church fellowship and other important events. So there's all these possible impacts of poor financial health. So this guy, he was exposed. We can talk about these kind of things, and I think it's healthy to talk about these kind of things, and they will help us just develop a healthy view of our personal finances. I've put down some honesty and ownership statements that will help, things that maybe we can recognize and say. Things like, I'm in debt, and it's a source of many arguments at home. My financial indiscipline is hurting others, that kind of ownership. I am deceitful when I talk about my finances. Again, a sense that I don't bring out the whole picture. I'm addicted to gambling. I know there's some issues where that might occur, and it's a difficult thing to talk about, but just being able to talk about it is helpful. My spending is out of control. That's important to recognize and to be able to say. I worry about my financial situation. Worry can really, again, take away the joy, but to be able to acknowledge that I do worry, it's on my mind, it's on my heart. My work schedule is unhealthy and it's impacting my spiritual life. So just the link between working in situations where you're working for the benefit of your finances, but then the impact is being felt elsewhere. I put this next one down. I could be earning more if I better use the talents God has given me. So there's an acknowledgement that maybe you aren't, or I aren't. I'm not fulfilling, or not able to work to my potential. Taking jobs that are maybe lower than my talent set or my gift set, and then there are consequences that come with that. Another one about honesty and ownership. I'm not declaring all I earn, and I'm cheating the tax office. As someone who's self-employed, this is one that dogs my mind a lot. I think, oh my goodness, let me just try and best put down as much as I can to avoid this whole idea of cheating the tax office. Another one, an honesty statement. I earn well, but I'm reluctant to give back to God. In other words, I'm earning well, but I'm reluctant to give. I want to hold on to what I have. Amen. It's good to be honest. And some people may believe they have a healthy relationship with money. Great. And I think you may have a statement that fits you, but I think it's helpful to acknowledge ownership, honesty, with whatever financial situation you're in. And that helps us move on to further steps. You know, it's refreshing when you decide to talk openly about your money finances. It's also refreshing when you can recognize the impact on how you feel. So I've just stated this, it's refreshing. Openness is always refreshing. Stepping into the light is always refreshing. Recognizing the impact of money and finances on how we feel is refreshing. For a lot of men, I know for me, I find it hard to express my feelings towards these things sometimes, but it's good to be able to express some of those things. The next slide here is on clear understanding and good judgment. The definition of shrewd I put up there, having a clear understanding and a good judgment of a situation resulting in an advantage. So the dishonest manager was commended. He was shrewd. In other words, he kind of the world stopped for a second and said, "Whoa, okay, so what's happening? I'm losing my job. There'll be no income. Okay, I can't dig." I'm not sure why he said that. Maybe he didn't have the physical strength, or maybe he felt it was beneath him to dig. And he said, "Oh, okay, so I can't dig, I can't beg, I can't go around asking for money. Well, I'm living in an honor society that will affect my honor." But one thing we do know is that he stops and starts to try and get some understanding. And I think that's a very helpful and important place for many of us, is to stop and try and get a good understanding of our finances and learn how to make good judgments. In verse 11, it says, "So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will you entrust you with true riches?" So it's very clear from the Bible that being trustworthy in handling our worldly wealth or money is clearly something that God looks at. So it's important that we learn that handling our finances is super, super important. And again, there's a call for us to be shrewd. All right, so what I thought I'd do is just list some ways I think, or what I've learned from in terms of generating a clear understanding and good judgment. I strongly believe in education, education, seeing a need for and getting financial education. As Obi kind of alluded to, although I went to university and studied many things, about 18 years ago, I did have a career change, and a lot of that career change was linked to education. So I started to read, first of all, I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Kiyosaki, Robert Kiyosaki, that just helped me to understand taxation. But that started off for me a kind of, just opened up a Pandora's box of, wow, there's a lot of things I don't really know about money, things that they don't teach you at school or college. They don't teach you about money. They don't teach you about the feudal system, the taxation system, the way that governments are set up. They don't teach you about how to run a business, and they don't teach you these things. So as I said, about 18 years ago, I started to look into that a bit more. So of course, the temptation is to attend free events, because obviously you can learn. Usually free events lead to the kind of hosts or organizing events that you have to pay for. But I must admit, I've spent quite a bit of money attending events that have been my personal training, continual professional development, they call it maybe, but spending money to learn something from experts. So I have gladly, well, I'm not saying gladly, but I've grudgingly offered my money to people, and they have taught me things that have helped me in my own business and handling my own finances. So I would say, just see there's a lot of stuff you can learn, and wanting to and willing to learn about your financial situation and how to handle your finances better is a good thing, whether done inside the church or outside of the church, to really learn. You know, I put down here also this idea of seeing the need to learn from others. I never forget, a chap once taught me, he said, because I think I was applying for a mortgage, and I was turned down. So I took that as a kind of, well, I can't get a mortgage. And he said, well, what you've got to realize is that the chap who did that says that he cannot get you a mortgage. You'll find someone who says they will be able to get you a mortgage. And that's what happened. I found someone who kind of was able to understand my finances and say, well, you can get a mortgage, but some of the conditions will have to change because your risk factor has gone up. These are some of the changes. And I gladly took the new mortgage. But if I'd have listened to the first chap, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So I just learned from an early stage that being around people who think a certain way can really help me think a certain way, and just find people who do have the answers. So if somebody says no, that's not a universal no. That is their no. I can ask the same question to someone else. So I've learned over the years to really ask questions, find out who can help me do this or help me achieve that. I think learning to seek out specialists as well is also important. My broker is an expert. She does things. So I just give her the information and tell her what I want. And she's an expert. I can't do what she does. She understands things more than I do. But she's an expert. She's a specialist. So I speak to her about particular things. And then I put down here, learning to be shrewd in relation to our bills and overheads. I do think there are many tools these days, not just search engine tools, but I think there are many ways to organize our personal finances, or to pay less for things that we don't need to be paying for, or remove insurances and fees and things we're doing that are unnecessary, and maybe we're spending in ways that are not the best. So I think there's value in really learning to be shrewd in our relation with our bills. The next one is having friendships with people who do well financially. I learn a lot from people who are just my friends. So I hang around them. The Bible talks about, the importance of the company with whom you surround yourself with. So being around people who have certain views and ideas and ways, I think is great. And if you can find a group of people who can be that way for you, fantastic. They just think differently. And I love it. Learning to read your financial landscape, your salary and how much you earn, how much you could earn. I think it's important to, as I mentioned earlier, to be sober about your abilities, your skills. Does your salary reflect your gift set? And if it doesn't, that's something to think about, and find a way to make your salary and your gift set kind of line up together. So I think we need to be living up to our gift set and skill set. And if that it means earning a lot more, then that's totally fine, rather than underperforming or feeling underused. So yes, do your earnings match your talents or gifts? I think it's also important to recognize your spending habits and limits. And the next probably link to budgeting. Some people don't like the idea of budgeting. For the past, I think since I got married, I have a spreadsheet that logs all my spending. So I have about 30-year history of my spending. I don't use it much now, but I used it early on because when I was borrowing money and doing things, and I was just trying to understand my spending. And some months I think, wow, I'm spending more than I'm earning. And then that's an alarm bell if you're spending more than you're earning. But budgeting is important, and also keeping a log of maybe your actual spending is particularly helpful. If you need to get help with budgeting, that's great. I write my own spreadsheets because I want them to be done my way. I want the numbers that I want. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to write my own code into Excel and get the information I actually need. And I use Excel a lot to make decisions because that gives me numbers, and I'm a numbers person, and that's how I make a lot of my decisions. Another thing I put on here is considering and planning for your future financial needs. I do think as a young Christian, I didn't really think much about what would happen when I get to 65 or beyond. I thought it was too far away, didn't warrant my thinking about. Why should I think that way? And I think a lot of the ministry staff as well were taught. I wasn't on staff, but there was this sense that it's not important. Just plan for your spiritual future, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I do think it is important because at some point your young kids will go to university, and then you have to make some big financial decisions. Preparing for a rainy day. Life may be good now, but at some point, things may take a turn. It could be your health. It just could be the economy. It could be, as we've learned through the pandemic, maybe your choice of career could be impacted. But I think the parable does teach us to consider and secure our future. So I do believe it teaches us to consider preparing for things that are ahead. And as I said, that could be anything from retirement, paying for university kids' school fees. And these need some consideration. I'm not saying you need to have all the answers, or all the numbers need to stack up. I think the charge is just to understand that this is how life is going to unfold. And of course, the being shrewd part is to be able to have a good understanding of this, and then a good judgment. So to be able to say, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do about my this potential rainy day? What am I going to do if I can't work? What if I'm going to do if my kids go to university and they require, I need £7,000 a year for accommodation? Or if you've got twins, like I know a couple in the East, I think they had a 19 or 20,000 pound a year bill increase just for accommodation at university. And also supporting family. There could be issues and needs, as I mentioned earlier, within the family. You want to be able to be a support financially to those who have needs around you. One thing I put on there is career change, living in step with your talents. Could you retrain or use your gifts or skill sets more adequately? Yeah, I do think it's important that we think about these things. About 20 years ago, I was beginning to get unhappy with my job. I was working in Cambridge. I was traveling a lot around Europe and around the world as part of my job. And but it wasn't doing for me what I thought it would do, and I wasn't fulfilled. So about 18 years ago, I started to train as a plumber. So as one of the brothers in the East told me very clearly, he said, Andy, what happened from PhD to plumber? He thought, wow, from up there to down there. And I thought, well, maybe that's the way you see it. But I retrained as a plumber. I set up a business. Then I retrained as a gas engineer. But at the same time, I was buying houses. So I was investing in property, investing in the plumbing and gas in industry. And so the two were going hand in hand, and we buy a place, do it up. And I was doing plumbing and gas for myself, for other people as well. So over the last 18 years, I've been doing that. And I found it something that I really enjoy doing. I'm earning better than I was before. I have more freedom than I had before. And I'm living a better life than I was before. I'm a lot more fulfilled. And I do think career change is something to consider. It's not for everyone, but I do think it's something that if it's something you want to consider, it's an important thing to do. So that's something there. So I put at the end of this session, it's refreshing when you can learn and improve the way you handle your finances. So I think learning and improving, I think it can bring refreshing. If you can realize some of your bills can be halved, I feel refreshed when that happens to me. When I can learn something new, I feel refreshed if you can help me with my finances. All right, the next or final session is on using your money as God intended. The whole parable that we just read earlier, I believe has one purpose, and the purpose is preparing and securing your spiritual future. The shrewdness that God was, or Jesus was calling us to, was related to, just really learning. I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar with, well, you must be familiar with scammers. I don't approve of scamming, but one thing I do notice from them is that they're incredibly clever. They put a lot of energy and thought into what they're going to do. And I think that's what God is saying in a sense in this problem, is that some of these people who use worldly wealth, they use it incredibly, they think carefully, they spend a lot of time to get it right. And I think what Jesus is saying, use that energy for spiritual things. Invest and have that mindset of just working things out in your spiritual life to secure your future. Do that. And he says here, verse 9, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. There is a sense here that, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves. And we'll talk about that a bit further down. Verse 13, it talks about no one can serve two masters. And I think can serve God and can serve money. Although we're talking about finances here, I just want to make it very clear that this distinction between serving two masters needs to be very clear for us. And I've put down kind of a list here of, you might call it a health test to see if money is your master, because you cannot serve both God and money. So I put a list here. I'll see if I can just get it on my other screen. Yeah, so there's I think there's a very interesting ways. These are some ways I put down. I'm not sure I'm going to go through each and every one, but it is aimed at looking at how we view our finances in terms of our money. Let me just get it up here as well. Hold on a sec. Yes, so I thought I'd try and help us all kind of do a kind of health check in terms of how we view money. So the first one is a health test. Is the pursuit of money adversely affecting your health, basically. So this is a test of a question you can ask yourself in terms of whether money is your master. Is it affecting my health? Because that is not in any way a godly thing. Are you working too much? Are you putting too much effort into this, and is it having an adverse effect? So that's one test you can do. Another one is the pursuit of money adversely affecting my relationships with my family, with my children, with my husband, my wife. Is it having a damaging effect on those relationships? The materialism test, do you have too many things? A lack of contentment. So there's this sense of just wanting material possessions. There's no doubt we need material possessions, but I think just the craving and the thought that they will bring you contentment. So there's a lack of contentment. I need something else, and I need money to get that something else, and that will make me happier. The generosity test, are you giving a portion of your income away? Once somebody quoted, said, "Don't tell me where your priorities are, show me where you spend your money, and I'll tell you where your priorities are." So there's this sense of don't say God is your priority, show me your bank account. I will see where you spend your money, and will show me where you invest, where you want things to be. So you can say as much as you want what your priorities, but your bank balance will probably help say what your bank balance is, what your priorities are. There's a resentment test. So let's say you do give money away, or you do give, but in your heart you don't feel you're not giving with a joyful heart. I feel this a lot. I think, wow, because there's a sense of resentment. You're not giving freely. So you are giving. You may pat yourself on the back. I am giving. Well done. But there's a sense of, I didn't really want to give. I'm only giving because I'm supposed to give. So I commend you for giving, but really the next stage is to really learn to do without resentment. There's a moral test. Do you or have you done things that are morally questionable and or taken shortcuts in order to obtain money? So this is a test for you where you can ask yourself questions about how you handle your finances. What you do when you have been to the restaurant and they've miscalculated your bill and they're charging you less than what you know it was worth. Do you flag that up and say, excuse me, your bill says £20, in fact, it should be £45? Or do you walk away thinking God has blessed you with a lower bill? Which, don't know which way you see it, but this moral test is a kind of a test of soberness, of being sober in terms of how you do things, your moral standards in decision making, where your money goes to, whether you lie or are deceitful just to save on money or whatever. But that's a big one for you to think about. The get rich quick test, do you fall for get rich quick schemes? That's a common, I think many years ago, I used to get involved in this a lot. I thought you could do a few simple things and suddenly become rich. And there's a sense of, I think the sense is, I want to become rich. And that can, again, show whether money is your master. Sustainability test, do you spend more money than you earn? It's so tempting these days to spend. And the question is, you need to have a clear picture of what you spend and what you earn to be able to understand that very well. But are you just someone who spends and then thinks that the credit card or things will work out in future? Well, I'm going to get an inheritance, or it'll be fine in the end. Or do you live sustainably? The fulfillment test, in other words, is your career only supported by your desire to earn a certain amount of money? So it's money driven rather than, just thinking more broadly. In other words, I don't enjoy my job, but it pays well. I won't say there's anything wrong with that, but if money is your primary motivator, it's something to think about. The jealousy test, are you looking around at what everyone else has and wishing you had it too? Keeping up with the Joneses is the colloquial word for that. So just having an eye what other people have and thinking, oh, I wish I had that. And then that again is a good way, or one way to test your finances, whether you're putting your money ahead of God. All right, I put down some thoughts in terms of using money the way that God intended. These are by no means complete, but there are some things I put down. The first one is pray to have the same mindset as God regarding your finances. I think prayer for me helps me to think about things during the day. So if I pray about something in the morning, I tend to be thinking about that through the day. Be it if I'm praying to be kind, then throughout the day I'll be thinking, am I being kind? If I pray to be humble, I ask myself, am I being humble? So prayer for me, and the Bible says, we need to pray to have the same mindset as Jesus Christ. We can pray to have the same mindset as God. So, God, help me to have your mind towards the finances or the money that you have given me. It's a bold prayer because it means you have to follow it through. Another one is be Bible literate, obedient regarding money and godliness. So James 1:22, it says, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves, do what it says. It's when the Bible talks about money and our finances. Do you know what God's expectation is? Do you apply that? Prioritize your relationship with God above money. That sounds like some kind of vague, nebulous thing, but I do think those who do prioritize the relationship with God above money, I think in many ways you can see the fruits in their lives. Remember the parable of the rich fool. And as we just read even just now, it says money will be gone one day. There's this sense that in the parable, he told the guy or it tells us to win friends so that they will welcome us into heaven, because one day money will be gone. And the parable of the rich fool in Luke 12 describes just this lack of clarity on that. So the chap wanted to build bigger barns and provide for himself, and he didn't factor in the fact that it could be taken away immediately, and that's what happened. So I think we've got to remember the power of the rich fool. In Matthew 6:19, it talks about storing up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Again, that's something to pray and consider in how we use our finances. Is what I'm doing more on a spiritual level, or is it just trying to meet my own needs? Learn the secret of contentment. I put there Philippians 4:12-13. One of my favorite verses in the Bible. It talks about whether well fed or hungry. There's this sense from Paul that, I've learned something. I've learned the secret of contentment. So if I'm wealthy or if I'm rich, I'm content. If I'm poor, I'm equally content. It's not measured by the size of my bank balance. And that secret is an incredible one that I think is extremely valuable. The passage talked about using money to win friends. My understanding of that verse where it talks about using worldly wealth to win friends, so they'll welcome you to your heavenly dwellings. I think it's saying, with the money we have, be kind and generous, give to others. As you try and help other people go to heaven. I can't explain it more than that, but it's certainly something that, with our finances in our hands, is a question we have to ask ourselves. Am I using this to win friends? That's a good question to ask. I put on there, be proactive, plan, budget for how you will use your money to help others to get to heaven. So again, it's something you can have a conversation with. And by the way, as I'm sharing these things, I'm learning as well. But you can have a conversation with people around you about using your money in a proactive way. In other words, to plan and to budget and to consider how you can give financially to help others get to heaven. Be generous with what you have. God loves a cheerful giver, but it's better to give than to receive. I think that's another healthy way of using our money as God intended. One thing that's helpful, I've learned a lot from, is anonymous giving. I know when my father died about 16 years ago now, one of the brothers just put an envelope in my hand with some cash. And did I need the cash? Maybe. I'm not particularly sure now. But one thing it did do for me, it taught me a lesson to give anonymously. So it's something my wife and I have done, and we'll do more of it. Just recognize a need and give anonymously through a third party, or in a blank envelope, put it in their pocket, and so on when they're not watching. So those are some ways of using money in that way. It is refreshing when you have the courage to embrace God's wisdom in regards to your finances. I think it's incredibly refreshing when we look to learn God's desire for how we use our money. The mistake we make sometimes is we think, I want to do it my way. I want to live and use my money my way. But God's ways are better, and we know better than ours. So I would say it's incredibly refreshing when we decide, or we choose, or have the courage to do things the way that God intended. I'm going to end there. Just to summarize what we spoke about, though, was honesty and ownership. Again, the call to just to be honest and own your financial situation. The idea of being shrewd, or clear understanding and good judgment. The call to, I think, really spend some time thinking and working things out and investing in how you can use your money wisely. And of course, the whole point of the parable was using your money as God intended. So as Christians, our goal really is to really live that way. I want my money, or the money that God has given me, to be used in a way that He will be pleased with. So that's an encouragement for all of us to use money as God intended. That's it, I believe, the end of the presentation. I'll now hand back to Obi